Good evening, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join us tonight. Welcome to Get the Buzz on Pollinator-Friendly Landscapes. I'm Stephanie Nunemaker, and I work in the Water Management Department here at Coachella Valley Water District. We're also known as the Communications and Conservation Department. Some of you we have maybe already worked with if you have participated in some of our rebate programs. But if you haven't, please take a look at our website so you can find all we have to offer. Hopefully everyone got a handout when you came in. They're right outside. But if there's anything that you may have missed, we will be recording this presentation and it should be on our website very soon. If anybody needs the restrooms, they're just out these doors and to your right. It is my pleasure to introduce our presenter this evening. Please welcome Myrnell Wong. She is a graduate of the 2016 Riverside County Master Gardener Program, and she is the coordinator of the Speakers Bureau for the desert area. Myrnell is also the president of the Plumeria Society and has been involved with them for 14 years. She's also an active member of the California Garden Clubs. Myrnell shares her passion and love for gardening and educating others through her presentations and demonstrations. I promise all of you are going to be so excited and ready to get in your gardens after this. So please enjoy, and here's Myrnell.
Hi. Well, first of all, I'm going to start off with a question. How many of you enjoy going outside, having that cup of coffee or that glass of wine, and seeing what's abuzz in your yard? That's right. And then sometimes we go outside and we're wondering, why is there not a buzz in my yard? You know, it should be happening. So let's learn maybe what we're doing right, maybe what we can be doing more to attract the beneficial insects. I'm going to first tell you a little bit about Master Gardeners. It is a volunteer program. It is 50 hours of education. There we go. No, she's already done that. Okay. So you do 50 hours of classroom education at the UCR off of Cook Street. So it's very, very close on Country Club and Cook there. And then you do 50 hours volunteer work. And that's what we do as volunteers, go out in the community. It can be in propagation, it can be working at school gardens, it could be helping teach people about gardening. So those are some of the things that we do. So Riverside County and Sacramento were the first two counties in the state of California to institute this program back in the early 1950s. Today we have 50 counties and all 58 in the state of California. Very active. We have over 6,000 master gardeners and they give 450,000 volunteer hours a year. So you can see they're very active in your community. So now let's move on and talk a little bit about our pollinators. Why do we need pollinators? And I like to we're a small group, so we can have an open discussion. I don't have to just talk to you. We can have an open discussion. Why do we need pollinators? Anybody? For food? Right. We need them to pollinate our crops. Very good. What can you do to attract the pollinators? You're going to have to plant the right types of plants that are going to bring the different pollinators into your yard. So you might be planting something, but it may not be what they like to eat or what they need for their habitat. Do all of these pollinators live in the desert? A lot of them do. But some of them just kind of come through and visit. So what do I need to plant? That's what we need to find out. Okay. So why do we need pollinators? And this lady back here said that we need it for our food. And that is true. Because bees and insects pollinate 75% of our crops, of our food that we get and put on our table. Now, it's very interesting to note here that out of that large population, and pollinating our food, what bee do you think is going to be the best pollinator to bring us that fruit? Let's say we have them in an apple orchard or a cherry orchard. What kind of bees do you want to pollinate that? Hungry ones. A lot of people say honeybees, and that's really interesting because we do see honeybees out in the fields and in orchards, but there are only 7 species of honeybees in the world, and none of them were native to the Americas. They were brought over to us by the early settlers from England, from Europe. We have other bees, and there are about 7,000 varieties worldwide. So another little tidbit here is, let's say in order to pollinate, I'm going to say citrus because we're all big citrus growers here. And we want to pollinate our orange tree or our lemon tree, and you have 100 honeybees pollinating that tree. You only need 2 mason bees to do the job of that 100 honeybee. So honeybees are not the best pollinators because they're using it to do other things. They have a nest to provide and cover for. But our natural bees, which one of them is the mason bee, and how many are familiar with the mason bee? These are solitary bees. I'm going to tell you a little bit else about bees. How many of us are afraid of bees? I used to be. Yeah, I'm very, 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 very allergic. Don't like bees. But I've learned to appreciate them because, again, which bee stings you? The honeybee. And why does the honeybee sting you? Because they have a queen to protect and they have a hive to protect. That's what they do. They're here and they want to protect the queen and all of the siblings and their honey. So they're going to, they react off of pheromones and whatever, but this is what they do. They're going to protect this. So with that being said, a mason bee and all of our other bees, only 7 species live like this. The other ones are going to live in other habitats, and I'll talk more about that. So that's another reason. So that's pretty interesting things to know too. So we need healthy pollinators to have a healthy ecosystem. We have done so much to damage our growing fields, the pollinators, to where it's affecting how our crops are being produced. Because if we're using pesticides to kill the bad bugs, it doesn't know not to kill the good bug. So we really have to think about what are we using in our yards. If you have a citrus tree and you're not getting fruit on it and you're fertilizing and you're watering, then you need to look at what's happening with your pollination. So outside the agricultural system, we have 80 to 95 plant species require animal pollination. So in other words, for their food and habitat to be reproduced, we need 95% of pollinators to make that happen in nature, in the wild. So plants are the foundation of the terrestrial food chains. So there they eat foliage, fruits, nuts, seeds, are all eaten by herbivores. And then they are hunted by the predators. So see how that whole life cycle is happening? You need the pollinators that's going to pollinate and fertilize all these different flowering species of fruit and seeds and flowers. And in turn, then all of these other birds and other insects, small animals, are going to eat all of the seeds and the fruit, and therefore that whole life cycle happens. So all of this is being affected. The other thing, how many of you have heard that we're losing the species of bees? Yes. And we are. We have some that have already gone extinct. There's a lot of different ones out there. But we're going to talk about today how here in the desert we are affecting not getting those into our yards because it is to do with our landscape. So why we need healthy pollinators? To ensure that the next generation of plants will be produced. So this is the kind of thing that we want to see going on in our yards. Now the ladybug isn't a pollinator. She's not going to go out. She walks across pollen fields and whatnot. She might collect a little bit, but she's not a true pollinator. But in this whole relationship, she really helps keep other predatory bugs away. So that's one of the reasons why we want to see ladybugs in our garden. So you want to provide the right habitat. Now with that, we need to have the right kind of ground cover and mulch. Now, how many of us live in gated HOAs or restricted areas with what we do with our landscapes and whatever? A lot of us do. Also here in the desert, because we are taking out our grass, I've done it. I had 4 grass fields, around my home, and we took it out, and it changes everything because there is a bee that actually lives in the grass. So it's a tiny bee, but it lives there. So we have to provide them with the water that they need. This is one of the problems. They are very thirsty little critters. Butterflies, hummingbirds, the bees. So I really like this where they show that, I guess it's a dog or cat water, where they're putting some stones in there. You could also use marbles or whatever, and then the water stays in there. You notice there's a lot of dry areas. They need that. They don't like landing on top of your pool. They like to have a dry place to put their feet, and then they'll drink from the water. Same thing with butterflies. We're going to see that. But then some of us are lucky enough to have a little pond or something like that in our courtyard, or a water feature, any type of things like that, because the hummingbirds love a water feature. So they like water that is dripping down or spraying up a little bit, and that's what your hummingbirds really like. So we have to keep them hydrated just like we need to keep ourselves hydrated. So if you have these things in your yard, it's going to help bring them there and keep them there. So provide a living space. How many of you heard about bug hotels and condos? Yes, that is kind of the new rage. And there's a couple here that said that they have one, but they didn't know. They're usually the mason bee. It's a solitary bee. So the mason bee likes going into any kind of a hollow tube. This is where she's going to go and lay her eggs. And then they go through the winter, and they're just starting to come out now. They're just starting to hatch. So what she does is she lays all of her female eggs to the back of the chamber. And then she will separate it with a pollen wall, because that's what the little, when it hatches, that's what it's going to eat. But it'll have consecutive chambers of eggs. The male bees get laid towards the front. So she gets to decide what sex she's going to have and where she's going to place them in the chamber. So the girls go first, the boys go last. That's so when it hatches, then the boys can go out, fly around, be ready, and then when the females come out, then they're ready to mate and do the reproduction thing all over again. So like I say, the process where we live, we don't have to be too concerned about the weather or being wet. If you look at this bug condo resort, I call it my bug resort, you notice that I have some different things going on. Over here, I have bamboo. They will use any kind of a plant material that has a hollow tube. You want to make them about 6 inches long. They need to have that room to chamber up. So when you drill in here, it's nice if you can make them 6 inches. On this piece of wood, next year I'll drill the other side of it, but they only last about 2 years. You have to keep them clean. They're kind of messy when they hatch out of that, have their debris and whatever. So you have to clean those out or replace them. A lot of people, what they do is they'll roll up paper and put it in a cup, and that's what they'll use to increase or encourage the pollination, to get the bugs to lay their nests, their eggs. So that's one of the things. Also, if you do something like this, we have our mason bees up here. This is good for ladybugs. They like crawling into different things. You can use straw which I have here, because they will attract different kinds of beetles, different kinds of insects. And I have some more little short sticks here that we drill for mason bees, and I have different twigs and things. So you're going to see that you're going to get even spiders, different insects that will want to come and live in your bug hotel. And this is what you want to do to help bring them into your yard. Yes?
You put those on the ground or on a pole?
You know, that's a really good question. They prefer morning sun, east sun, but don't put them up high. You know, as, you know, like a bird nest or a bird house, we want to put those things up high. This, you don't keep it 3 feet or below. They don't want to be high up. If you build something bigger, like in a bigger wood box or whatever, put it on a brick or something like that. Because like I say, a lot of the insects will crawl in but mason bees, like I say, about 3 feet. I wouldn't go more than 4. Yeah. So
they want the front to face the morning
east. East or southeast. So like I said, they like the morning sun. Remember that with like monarch butterflies and all of them, they're small little insects. In the morning when it's cold, the first light of morning is the coldest time on the temperatures. So they need that sun to warm up, to get their wings moving and whatnot. This is when they're most vulnerable to predators, which are going to be birds. Do not hang bird statues or ceramic birds on top or whatever, because then they're not going to come visit it. You know, don't put a predator around. Okay, so what can we do to help the pollinators? Well, aside from, in the picture here, aside from having the right kind of water habitat for them, it's nice to put out a bowl of nectar fruit. This has the sugars, and this will help the bees and the butterflies. So that will give them energy to keep about their day. So you want to plant a pollinator garden. Now, what does that mean? First of all, you need to decide what kind of pollinators you want in your yard. How many of you have vegetable gardens or fruit trees? Okay. I see a guest here that somebody I know from some other events, and she had a lemon tree and citrus, and she complained because she never had fruit on her tree. Didn't understand why. And then she planted a bottle brush tree and other pollinator plants. This year her trees are loaded. She also has a vegetable garden, and she's had the same experience, that all of this, and it takes about a year. You have to go through that one season to make it happen. So we need the nesting habitat, and we need the water resource, and we need to plant the right plants. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how many of us, in removing our grass, and we've all done it, we wind up putting in the DG and the rocks. Okay. Now, if you were a bug, are you going to come and try to nest or dig a hole in the DG? No. Oh, yes. DG is decomposed granite. And this is what you see in the landscape around. And we use it because it doesn't let the sand blow and whatever. But in your garden areas and in your pollinator garden, you need to have an area where you have mulch on the ground and you have soil that they can get into. Because a lot of bees burrow in the ground, and that's where they're going to lay their eggs and everything. So you need to create that environment where they have it. And also, a lot of your butterflies and insects need soil to get their nutrients. And so we're going to talk about that too. Yes?
What fruit is in that bowl?
Actually, in this bowl, you will see oranges and bananas. Right here, whoops, where's my little pointer? I don't see it. I'm not hitting it. Right there is banana, and these are oranges. They like melons, they like strawberries, but you can leave that about a day or whatever. The other thing I want to point out is how many of us see flies in our garden? Is that a bad thing? No, it's not. Flies are pollinators too. So we'll talk about that. But yeah, we think, oh no. So here what we've talked about. We're going to provide the bed and breakfast for our insects. And we're going to get them to come. And this is where you can see where they just built a larger box, put it up on bricks, got it up off the ground. Now, some of us may live where we really, in an apartment, a condo, where we don't have a large planting area. So we can actually create a pollinator garden in pots. So what we want to do is to plant the kind of plants that are going to attract them, to give them their nectar and their habitat. So we need nectar plants. Again, that's like putting out that bowl of fruit. So this is a ground cover daisy. This is lantana. We have some rocks where they can sun themselves. And then we're going to create a little place where they can do what is called puddling. Monarch butterflies, how many of you get those in your yard? Yes, we work hard to get those in our yard. Yes, but they like to have a puddling station. And what that is simply a damp piece of soil. So if you need to go and buy some good, rich soil or find some place to have it to where you can keep it moist, this is where they pull up all of their nutrients. So that's very important. It's important for them to make their little chrysalis with that. So, and remember that little gold thread that runs and the dot on it? That's all from the minerals and the nutrients they take up from the soil. Bees will also do that. And I want to point out that in one of the research papers I read, it says it's primarily the males that congregate the puddling stations. Don't know why. So find out which plant pollinators to grow in your area. So what pollinators do you want to bring in? And what is in my yard now that you can maybe change out or add to create better pollination? So one of that would be the kind of flowers you have. We're going to look for a certain kind of flowers, and we're going to look for flowers that have seed production because that's going to increase. We want fruits and vegetables to help with. Do you want them here to help with nature, or do you want to help with the monarchs? A lot of people just want to grow monarchs, so you're going to grow specific plants for that. So loving the hummingbirds in your yard, then I encourage you to plant plants that will attract them rather than being so dependent on the sugar water. Let's try to get nature back into the yard. So what do I need to know to make pollinators live in my yard? So meet the pollinators. As I was saying, we have the bees. We have the big black bumblebees. That's something we get a lot here. We have the solitary bees. This is probably the bee that you mistake as a honeybee. One way to tell the difference between a solitary bee and a hummingbee, a honeybee is the honeybee back two legs hang down. They're kind of thick and they hang down. On the mason bees and the other ones, their legs retract up as they fly. So those are some of the things that we have the leafcutter bees. I have a lot of those. They're the ones you'll see cut the little circles. They love the bougainvillea flowers. They cut those out. They come down and go up into their nest. Carpenter bees and the cactus bees. You'll see them at night. They come around the cactus blooms. Another thing, I don't know if I mentioned earlier, but again, it's just the honeybees that are going to be stinging. Not that any of these can't. They do have a stinger. But unless you step on it or do something that it has to defend itself, it's not going to attack you. Again, if you wear white clothing outside, you're not going to be attracting bees to you. So remember, all of these insects are attracted by color. So butterflies, here in the desert, we have the monarch, we have the queen. The queen butterfly looks very similar to the monarch, but it is different. We have the swallowtails and the sulfur. Beetles, we have a strong variety of beetles, and they are attracted by the scent of the flower. So beetles are busy, usually in the evening, the nighttime, when you don't see them, doing their pollination. I mentioned ladybugs. Remember, they're not truly a pollinator, but they do get rid of aphid and other bug larvae. In here, I'm going to point out that you don't see mention about wasp. We have paper wasp. We have a lot of wasp in the desert. The research on that is they say they're not a pollinator, but the more current research says they can be somewhat. They don't have any hair on their body, but they do find that they have a very fine, like velvety coat texture to their body. So it requires, that's why the bees and the bumblebees have all of these hairs, so they pick up all of the pollen, and that's where they take it back, or they eat it. So like I say, wasps are not a pollinator. So moths are attracted to flowers with strong, sweet smell in the late afternoon and the night. And remember, that's why the hawk moth is so prevalent to plumerias. Flies, they pollinate all of our little small flowers. So flies in the garden, and you'll see them flitting around. One plant flies will not go around, or mosquitoes, is lavender. So if you have a barbecue area, a door you want to keep them away, plant lavender. It will keep them away. Birds, basically we only have two pollinators in birds. That's the hummingbird and the white-winged dove. So the hummingbird has the long beak, and it's going to go after flowers that have the long tubes that hang down. That's what they're going to go into, like the shrimp plant, the honeysuckles, plants like that. So bats. Now, how many of you have lived here enough in the desert or long enough to remember when evening time came, the sky is just lit up with a whole swarm of these little bats? Yeah, I've lived here since '64 and I've seen that and witnessed that. Well, they not only eat insects, but they're the ones that are going to pollinate a lot of your cactus. And they do have a sticky tongue, and they're going to go after any kind of night bloom that's an open flower that they can get to the nectar. So our desert bats are great pollinators also. Okay, so the only plant in the monarch family, anybody wants to jump a guess? Tell me what it is. It's the native milkweed. And I have two samples here. This is an adult milkweed. This is a young one. What is it that you see that's so different? This one has leaves on it. Well, that's because the larva of the caterpillar hasn't eaten all of the leaves off of this one yet, because that's what they do. So the monarchs will only lay their eggs on this plant. When the little, I think it shows in the sample here, they lay their eggs on the plant. Then you have the larva. The larva is only going to eat the leaves and the flowers off of that milkweed. Monarchs eat nothing else. It's a good thing that across the Americas and other countries that there are over some 400 varieties of milkweed. But here in the desert, a lot of people are saying just native milkweed, desert milkweed. So of course we want our pollinators to have native plants. However, when you go to the store, it's very hard to buy native milkweed. It's hard to find. It's a little hard to grow. But swamp milkweed is readily available. And that's that really pretty one that has those beautiful, that beautiful orange and kind of cranberry colors sometimes. Very easy to grow. That milkweed stays green flowering 12 months out of the year. Native milkweed is only through the summer and dies in the fall, usually about October, November, when we get any cold weather, down to the ground, back up next year. Tropical milkweed, swamp milkweed, is another one. It produces a larger flower, but it's low to the ground, kind of a white milky flower. So they only eat milkweed. So what you want to do is, if you have tropical milkweed is in November, you want to cut it down to about 6-8 inches above the ground. That signals to that monarch you need to keep making your migration down south. Otherwise, they'll stay here, they'll overwinter here, they only eat that same food, and it creates just their own nesting pool, which isn't healthy because they don't go down to their native grounds.
They say they're wholesale, but on Saturday mornings they sell to the public, and they do have the
native.
Yeah.
That's great because I've only found one other source, and it's really hard. And like I said, it is a little harder to grow. When you plant the seeds, you just sprinkle them on the ground and kind of tap it down, and then water that. You do that in the early springs. Yes.
Can you say that?
Would you say the name again and where it's located?
It's called Green Desert Nursery. They're in Indio. And just open to the public on Saturday, but wholesale or, landscapers the rest of
Yeah.
Just Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday morning.
Just Saturday for normal people.
Till like noon, 11 or noon.
So milkweed flowers attract bees, wasps, butterflies, moths, and hummingbirds. So they do feed other pollinators. So like I said, they're just not for the monarch. So the top 8 plants for bees. Rosemary. How many of you have rosemary of any variety? The bees are all over that, right? So they love that. Lavender. Another thing, there's many varieties of lavender we can add to our gardens. Bee pollen. It's in the mint family and it flowers all summer with damp soil. So the colors are red, pink, and lavender. These colors are major attractors to all pollinators. You add yellow and orange and you can pretty well pull anything that you want into the yard. So the sedums, that's what you see here, this lavender here is a sedum. And like I said again, that is one, you see those all over. And they grow quite easily. And they come in red, hot pink, some different shades of orange. So the tall verbena. And now a lot of you are familiar with the verbena. We have the sand verbena that grows in the desert naturally. But the tall verbena grows on a stalk that comes up. And our insects like plants that have height to them and movement. So tall verbena looks really nice in your yards. It's a very desert-friendly plant to add to your landscape in your yards or to add to a pot. The coneflower are the purple flowers that have that orange kind of heavy cone in the center. All of your butterflies they like a platform to sit on. So that's what you want to do. Like over here, when we look at some of the plants over here, these attract your butterflies more so than your bees. This will attract hummingbirds because they have that platform for them to land on. This one here is called a pin cushion, and that's what it does. It provides them that landing space, and that's what they want to do. So all of these are attracting to a lot. Now we have our sunflowers. Mexican sunflower is more of a flower that you would put in your planter beds. So it isn't tall like your big seed-producing sunflowers. But this will attract your bees and your butterflies. So this is Sylvia. I'll think of it in a minute. Salvia. There you go. And they come in different colors, and they do very well. And even hummingbirds will come to this and off of this. So with that said, I was going to show here that here is what I'm talking about, flowers that look like this that create that landing platform. That they like to sit here and then they can suck and get their nutrients from the flowers.
Brunel? Sue and I can vouch for bottle brush being a good bee attractor also.
Right, yeah. I think I'm going to bring that up here. So plants that attract hummingbirds. Do the hummingbirds go to the bottle brush? Not as much, huh? Because they have a very tiny, tiny flower and they don't have that deep throat for them. But the yucca plant, I was really surprised, are desert yuccas. And that is a plant we can use in our landscape here. As annuals, we can use the zinnia. They come in all different colors and they hold up so well in the summertime. And you can plant those around your other landscape areas. You don't have to change a lot of your landscape. So the red hot pokers, those are kind of in your succulent cactus family. We know what those look like. We see them all along the roadways and here in town. The petunia. So we see how the hummingbird is in there getting its nectar out of the petunia. So the century plant, the butterfly weed, and geraniums. All of these are excellent plants. Now we're going to talk, I think, later about some vines. So here we are, hummingbird vines. So that's the cypress vine, which is self-seeding in warmer zones, and that does prove to be true here. That during the winter, when some of this, like even the morning glories, when they die back, they'll seed themselves and come back. So you're not investing and keep replanting things. The trumpet vine, extremely hardy here. Honeysuckles, we have a lot of these in our front yard, and the little hummingbirds are just busy all the time. I don't hang out hummingbird feeders because I have enough, I feel, to encourage that in the yard. trees and shrubs that attract hummingbirds. And I don't know why I have this here, but it must have said that in my research. So we need to give them a food source. So hummingbirds like perching on a stem. They like resting. So if you have a light stem, a leaf stem, they're not very heavy, so you can make your yard more hospitable. They spend, and I was surprised to know this, 80% of their time sitting. They're so busy flitting around the yard. So I was surprised to learn that. So having those shady places, providing them water, they like the moving water, and providing them the plants they need. So what is a simpler option is to try a butterfly bush. And again, we can do this in a pot. We can put this anywhere in our yard. We can move it. So like I said, if you have certain areas that maybe is a little more challenging for you, I wouldn't plant any kind of plants that are going to really attract the bees to my front yard, but I wouldn't mind planting other things around. And you can plant your citrus in pots. You can get dwarf citrus and put them in pots, and they will attract your bees and other pollinators. So plants that attract ladybugs, I do want to talk about them because they are so beneficial to us. And these plants attract all of our other bugs and beetles, because remember, all of them are helping to pollinate. So that's the geraniums, the mints, the parsley, dill, yarrow, fennel, cosmos, marigold, marigolds, and then the chives. And all of these you can grow year-round here. And the chives, you want to let these all bloom, go to seed, and they will come. Now, the one thing I wanted to mention up here too is I do have an insect that I have a lot of people talk to me about. They say it attacks their citrus trees, and this is the grasshopper. So any of you plagued with the grasshopper? People out at Sun City especially? Yeah. And what do? They eat your leaves. But they chew holes in the leaves, and they make them look like lace. But you know, he's not a predator in the sense that he's really going to damage anything. You just provided him a salad. Think of it that way. I know some people want to go out and they want to get that pesticide or whatever, and they want to treat their tree so that to get rid of those. But you know what? They are going to go through the life cycle and move on. Especially those of you who live on the edge of deserts. People like at Sun City, people at Four Seasons, things like that, where your property is close to the desert. You're going to have more of a problem with the grasshoppers than maybe those who live up in town. I've never had a grasshopper infestation. I'm in the center of Palm Desert here. So, but not that we couldn't, but like I say, just know that they really aren't going to damage, and you don't have to do a lot to control them. So here we go again, where I'm showing you where you have the coneflowers, you have nasturtiums, you have the bluebells, all of the different flowers. And one of the easiest ways, because the DG is difficult to dig into, so you can add some of your, I don't know, you might have ocotillo cactus in your yards, you might have a lot of succulents, you might have some palm trees or whatever, and it's pretty barren. You can plant these type of pollinator plants around the base of them. They are going to come in and out of season. So through the summertime, right now they've got petunias planted a lot, but then it's going to get too hot for them. Then you can plant your marigolds and your zinnias. And there's a few other plants that you can plant that will go through this horrific heat that we're going to have. And that's what you want to do. The passion fruit vine is another wonderful vine. And it will go all summer if you provide it some shade. And that will attract and become a habitat. So you don't need a big yard or a big budget to increase your pollinators. Simply combine 3 plants in a pot, sit it on a sunny patio, and water. One tall, one upright, one that's like a sedge that's going to drape down over the side to make it look attractive. Bees love daisies of any kind. That's what I was saying about the flat surfaces. So you want to work with that. Combine your daisies with a member of the mint family, like lavender, oregano, catmint. Flowers for this draw pollinators with their nectar that provide energy for flight. So this is your cosmos. And we see a lot of this in the desert. You see a lot of these. And again, these are something that you can plant. They can help reseed themselves. They'll come up again. But you can plant other things, so it can be ongoing. And it brings you color, and it's going to do well. They, again, you can see the color palette all of these pollinators like, which are pinks and reds, blue flowers. They like blue flowers too. So long blooming lavenders, flowers, spring to late summer. All of these plants that I mentioned grow in our region up to region 10. So we are good to plant any of these plants. They provide a long blooming, delicate blossoms. And if you add the catmint as a ground cover, and it spills over the container. Flowering sage and salvia are easy to grow, shrubby magnets for nectar seekers. Colors are mostly reds, pinks. Some of the names that you will look for in the nursery is desert blaze, flame, hot lips. These are all tough and dependable. And so they're good for butterflies and hummingbirds. But this is a good example of how the bee crawls around on top, and it's collecting all of that pollen on her legs, on her little fuzzy body, gets all covered. Some of them get so weighted down they can hardly fly. So I want to ask before I go into anything else, do you have any questions that you have about planting a pollinator garden? Yes?
Yes, what zone do you consider us
9.
in? Okay.
We're zone 9. We are actually at the edge. Yes, Bob?
I was going to say, is that sunset or is that?
That's sunset.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems to be a little more accurate for our area.
For our, yeah, we're zone 9, and we're on the edge, the outer edge of the Sonora Desert. Sonora Desert is Arizona. They get a lot of the more tropical weather, the monsoons, and so their plants are a little bit different because they are going to get different amount of rainfall, and the elevation is different. That was the one thing that I also learned about the milkweeds and things like this. You know, if you're in Indio, you're going to be anywhere from the main street in Indio is 150 feet below sea level. Where I live over by Liberty Park, I'm about 46 feet above sea level. And if you go over on Indian Avenue in Palm Springs, they're about 150 feet above sea level. If you go on down to Thermal, they're going to be a couple of 100 feet below sea level. That's why they get the freeze, and it kind of comes up the desert and we don't. So with that in mind, we are affected by some of the plants we can grow, and some will do better. So when you have a neighbor that says, oh my goodness, I can grow this and it does really good, well, those are some of the factors. But the biggest thing is when you're going to be planting these plants, you have to prep the soil too. So remember that DG is hard. It has that component in it so that makes it get really hard. So you have to dig that out, mulch it around, add more soil and mulch to plant any of these things. But if you have anything in your yard, if you have rocks up against the citrus trees, for example, how many of you have that? You got rocks that go all the way up to this, no? You want to pull that back. You want to pull that back, and then you can plant these pollinator plants right there. They're going to be watered with your citrus. It's already getting water. So this will make it easy. One of the easiest things is to add the pots, the flower pots with your different pollinator plants. And then if you have a garden or citrus tree, you want to move that where they are so that then they will. Now I was also reading, honeybees will travel a great distance to pollinate something or in an orchard. Your mason bees and your other bees, they go 300 feet. They want to live and do everything right where they are. But a honeybee can travel and go and do his thing and come back. But like I say, your other solitary bees stay in one area. I just wanted to let you know that, yes?
When you say one area, how many feet?
300 for a mason bee.
300.
Right.
Okay.
So if you go out and get ladybugs, what are they going to do? A lot of people order them online. You keep them in the fridge. You let them out at night, and they go attack. Right. And guess what? 2 days later, you can't find a ladybug in your yard. Two things happen. They keep going and eating all the aphids because you didn't have any more, and so they have to keep eating and feeding, or you have a pest control company and they're all dead because you have that monthly service. That is what is taking the pollinators away. The other thing they'll do, because they have a lot of aphids, they'll go out and get praying mantis. Well, guess what? They eat everything. A praying mantis will eat all of its siblings. It will even eat its mate. So praying mantis, we all love them, but you don't want a lot in your yard because they'll do the job, that's for sure, but they will eat every other insect. Wasps are good to keep down the, some of the bad bugs. And because what they do is they will, even the monarch butterflies, they sting the larva in the caterpillar stage, and they inject their babies into that. And so that's what they eat, that's what they live on. And so that's what wasps do. So like I say, we don't want to really attract them so much. They do have some benefit in our whole ecosystem. So that's the biggest thing to keep in mind. So you can, like I say, you can find your plants and incorporate them and get basic things that will help you in your garden. Master gardeners, you can find us. Some of you have seen us here at like the Cathedral City Library, the La Quinta Library. We get talks once a month from 3:30 to 5:30 in Cathedral City. La Quinta from 11 to 12 on the fourth Tuesday. Farmers markets, we do those twice a month. Here in Palm Springs, second and fourth Sundays in La Quinta, and every Wednesday in Palm Desert. If you have gardening questions, pest problems, a lot of people get whitefly in the desert. You'll get powdery mildew in the desert. People want to know what they can do to eradicate these problems on some of their larger trees and plants. So we do have all that information. And this was some of the useful information. This is a book, and I'm going to pass this around. You can take a look at it. My husband's back there. He can collect it at the end. I picked this magazine up at Lowe's, but it really has everything you need to know about plants for attracting pollinators to your yard and what you can do. It's an excellent book. It's only about $10. So a gardening question that you have, as I was mentioning, is here on the UC campus that we have in Indio. It's our helpline. We have a phone number and we have an email. So we do have staff that will respond to your email within hours generally, but less than 24, but usually the same day. The phone hotline takes a little bit longer because someone has to go in and retrieve it. But if you can always take a picture of the problem you're having, send the photo to them, state your question, then that makes it a lot easier for them to address the issue. So these are the references that I used for my research on this slide. So I want to thank everybody, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. So yes?
Which lavender, is there any lavender, I think the desert lavender maybe will make it through the summer?
Right. And I actually went to Moeller's. I went to Moeller's the other day, and I talked to him about a couple of, but the biggest thing with lavender is you got to keep the soil moist. That's the biggest thing. I mean, that will go south in a heartbeat. But your desert lavenders, because lavender is very hardy. It's from Italy and from some of the drier, more arid areas. And it has so many uses, you know, throughout history. So, and there's so many varieties, but stay away from the French lavenders, the ones from Provence, the ones that you use for herbs, things like that. They need that more shaded area for them. So like I say, but like I said, there's a lot of herbs that attract your beneficial insects that you want to keep in your yard.
Could you go back one slide?
Sure. The helpline? Yeah, you can take a photo. That'll take care of your needs. And you know what? We actually have Scientists on site, I mean, if we get in trouble and we really need to research something about a bug or something, we can get you the answer. We put the research in, we have the tools to find an answer for you. We get a lot of questions about citrus, about the leaf curl, about different bugs. How many of you were affected by the boatman bug last year? The boatman bug. Yes, yeah. Their annoyance, they came from, I believe, the Salton Sea is where they came in, and they landed in our pools and whatever. I wasn't bothered that much, but I had friends up in La Quinta that just said it was awful. But these are some things that happen. They're just a nuisance. Yeah, you couldn't really, it's a little water bug, and it lives on the algae or whatever within the water, and they float around and whatever, and your pool becomes this whole swarm of little tiny black insects. So they were called the boatmans.
Were they resistant to the chlorine?
They seemed to do just fine in it. That didn't seem to bother them, or salt pools or whatever.
Just kind of
But it, like I say, it was really hot. It was just one of those things that happened in our ecosystem that it created them. So, but like I said, we got a lot of calls about that. So don't hesitate to call us and let us help you. Well, I hope you found some value and some benefit and that you can enjoy. Nothing beats inviting a few friends over and having a glass of wine or that early morning coffee in your solitude and enjoying nature. This is one of the things that make this time of our life so pleasant and enjoyable. So I hope you go home and get to hear the buzz.